Now, if you think about that, what technology did Netflix have? Reed Hastings, the CEO and founder, realized that there was a new technology that was available already. Netflix didn't invent streaming. Everybody had access to it. If you break something that belongs to somebody, they're going to be unhappy, they're going to respond. If you can predict what they're likely to do, you need to have a strategy. Technology alone is not what will disrupt markets.
How can a small company win big companies? Is high technology the key to a successful business? Let's dive into the story with Thales Teixeira, the author of Unlocking the Customer Value Chain. Nice to meet you. Please introduce yourself to the viewers.
My name is Thales Teixeira. I'm a professor at the University of California. Prior to that, I was a professor at the Harvard Business School for 10 years, and I'm the author of the book Unlocking the Customer Value Chain, and I'm the co-founder and CEO of Decoupling.co. We are a digital consultancy and advisory company.
Can you please briefly introduce to your book, Unlocking the Customer Value Chain?
Unlocking the customer value chain is an explanation of how startups are fighting to disrupt large established companies, and from the big companies, how are they responding to the rise of the startups. So cases such as Wayfair and TripAdvisor, and through the process of this research, I learned, to my astonishment, it wasn't just purely using new technologies or disruptive technologies, they were unlocking the customer value chain.
What is the customer value chain?
The customer value chain is basically the series of activities or steps that consumers need to do in order to acquire, use, and then dispose of products. For example, if I want to buy headphones, first I need to become aware that I need something. And then oftentimes when I'm aware, I just start looking around passively, and at some point in time I become an active comparer. That's a third step in the customer value chain. I go to the store, pay for it, I take it home, learn how to use it. One day I might throw it away or resell it. So all these activities are part of the value chain that creates value for me as a customer.
Could you explain digital disruption?
Digital disruption is a phenomenon that is characterized by two elements. First element is big established companies. If you think of it, Boeing, IBM, BMW, Mercedes, lose a sizable amount of market share. And condition number two is in a relatively short period of time. We're not talking about 100 years or 50. We're talking about 15 years, sometimes 10, sometimes 7. So wherever I looked in which a big established company lost a sizable amount of market share in less than 10 years, that is digital disruption.
It was very interesting that you took the customer-centric approach in order to explain the disruption that's happening in this era. Could you explain the difference between the customer-centric approach and the company-centric approach?
In the 80s and 90s and 2000s, there was competition, but competition wasn't that much. Companies were really much more powerful than they are today because customers wanted their products. Switch to today, if I go to a store here in California, there's a dozen brands of television, and in many categories: clothing, automobile, electronics. And so the customer has become more powerful. So companies need now to adapt to the customer as opposed to the other way around. Instead of competitive strategy, thinking about how to be customer-centric, understanding what customers want and delivering what they want.
Why is a customer-centric approach so important, especially in digital disruption?
The driver of digital disruption is being fundamentally because of these so-called disruptive technologies. What I learned is that customers disrupt markets. When I visited many startups, and the first startup I visited was Facebook, Netflix, Airbnb, they didn't have new, better technologies than the other companies. It was available to all of them. Startups at the time were doing was a process that was very customer-centric, focusing on what customers are unhappy. They were changing their behavior, and by doing that, they build a business around to satisfy the new needs and wants of customers.
Some people may say that the Netflix business could be enabled due to the technology of streaming, but you're saying that the core value or core difference in Netflix was giving some value to the customers.
The vast majority of cases of digital disruption are where technology is available and the startups, they understand the customer value chain, they look at one activity that they think that the customer is unhappy, and they decide to do that activity better for the customer. Now, if you think about that, what technology did Netflix have? Reed Hastings, the CEO and founder, saw that people wanted more convenience, but they wanted to watch whenever they wanted and wherever they were. Reed Hastings realized that there was a new technology that was available already. It's called streaming. Netflix didn't invent it. It didn't own it. Everybody had access to it. Netflix took advantage of it because Netflix knew where customers were changing their needs and wants and changing their behavior. That is a fundamental element behind what we observed. In a few cases, a company has a proprietary technology that is innovative and nobody else has. But very few cases are like that. Decoupling is the breaking apart of the activities in the customer value chain, often by a startup or a disruptor who steals one or very few activities to perform better than what the established company was doing. So, to give one example, to get a credit card is you go to your bank and you apply for a credit card. You wait because they'll have to process and evaluate your credit score or your ability to pay. Then they'll send it by mail, you receive it, and you start using it. Oftentimes, this whole process takes 3 to 7 days. Some fintechs all around the world decided to do is to decouple this process. You go to the website, you fill out very few information, and then they'll automatically decide whether they're going to give you a credit card or not. And if they decide that they're going to give you a credit card, they'll give you a number so you could do online shopping immediately.
In your book, it introduces the 3 phases of business model innovation. Could you explain the 3 phases and how they are different, and especially how decoupling is different from the first 2 phases?
Disruption comes in waves. Suddenly something happens and many industries are disrupted. The first wave of disruption happened when the internet became popular in 1994, 1995. That was a process of unbundling. For example, I used to buy a CD when I was young and it had 15 to 20 songs. I couldn't just buy one thing. I had to buy everything. Today, you don't buy that anymore. When you want a song, you just buy one song. The internet and these new businesses, they broke apart the product and they sold to consumers just pieces of it. Around the year 2000, a new wave came. This new wave was called disintermediation. Companies decided to, instead of sell their products and services to another company that would sell to the end consumer, they would go directly to the consumer. So travel agencies, they would buy services like hotel and airfare, and they would sell it to their consumers, the travelers. And then now today, all hotels and airlines have a site that you can buy directly. Disintermediation, breaking the supply chain and crossing over and selling directly. Decoupling is also a form of breaking, but what is broken is the customer value chain. Instead of companies doing everything, a startup comes and breaks that apart and does just one sliver of that activity for you.
Do you think there will be a 4th wave coming in the influence of AI?
That's a very good question. It's possible that AI will be a wave of disruption. Generally, what we've observed is the technology alone doesn't cause digital disruption. So when the internet came, it wasn't this huge disruption in the market. It took many years, sometimes decades, for companies to create new business models. So my guess would be that, yes, AI will create a lot of opportunities as a technology, but the biggest impact in people's lives will take a little bit longer as companies understand what customers are unhappy doing today and then create a business model, because it needs to be good for the customer, it needs to be good for the startup that is creating this.
I would like you to explain the 3 types of decoupling that you mentioned in the book.
Any industry that there's decoupling, it can be classified into value creation decoupling, value capturing decoupling, or value eroding decoupling. The first type of activity is called value creating activity. Doing that activity alone creates value for customers. One video game company, a disruptor in the United States called Twitch. Twitch, it doesn't allow you to play the game. It allows you to watch somebody else playing the game. So playing a game is a value creating activity. We all know that. But watching the game being played is a value creating activity. Twitch broke that. It decoupled and saying, we're only going to offer the option of people to watch others play games. And it created a gigantic business that was sold for $1 billion to Amazon. Value capturing decoupling, when you eliminate or you reduce a value capture activity, now the most common way is to offer a game for free. It's called the freemium model, and that decouples not having consumers have to pay before they play the game. And the third activity is super important. Value eroding activities are activities that, if done in isolation alone, the customer doesn't benefit. A value eroding activity that can be decoupled away in the video game is the streaming of games. Now more and more people, instead of buying a game, they stream the game. And with that, they don't have to go somewhere to buy the media to stick it in their console or download or anything like that. So when we learn this, no matter what product or service you're selling, each activity can be a value creating, value capture, value eroding.
Why do you think the innovative business model is more important in success than having highly developed technology?
I definitely don't want anybody to get the impression that technologies are not important. We can see technologies everywhere, but there's a lot of technologies that are being brought to market that they fail, that nobody wants. I actually have an example one here that I use. This was launched by Google. It's called Google Glass. I bought it many years ago. Launched by Google. I paid more than $1,000 for it. It's useless today. But customers didn't adopt it. It went away. And by that, blockchain, Bitcoin, metaverse, a lot has been talked about it, but few companies are adopting. The technologies that become disruptive are the ones that the customers choose to adopt. Customers saying, there's value in that. I want it. Electric cars, mobile phones, huge value in that. So that's why the focus has to be on the customer. Then, once you focus on the customer, you need to figure out how to deliver that, how to create value for the customer. The business model is a way to create value for certain customers, and then how to capture value from that. Technology, as I view it, it's a motor to the business model. Certain technologies is like a motor. If the business model is doing well, technology alone is not what will disrupt markets.
Why do you think that small and new companies, like startups, have an edge over big companies in disruption?
Startups, they start with nothing. So for them, it's just they want to go up. And the way to go up is to acquire customers. And to acquire customers, you need to create value for customers. But big companies are not like that anymore. They're not always thinking about the customer anymore. They're thinking, how do I keep my job? How do I make money for the investors? So there's a lot of cultural differences and process differences.
Could you explain a framework that entrepreneurs can execute right away?
I call it a recipe for decoupling. The first step of the process is to map out the customer value. So you choose an industry, banking or education or healthcare, and then you focus on a group of customers and you map out the activities that they are required to do in order to consume products and services that they want. Step number 2 is identify the weak link. Weak links are these activities where customers, they just don't like it. The company doesn't do it well. In traveling, one of the things that I was most unhappy is, and I would have to figure out a hotel in each city, and I have to compare options of hotel rooms availability, and I filled out the forms to get access to the price. It was just a nightmare. That's a weak link. And once you identify the weak link, then you need to map out what activity are you talking about. Is it a value creating activity, a value capturing activity, a value eroding activity? You're going to try to break that link and steal that activity for yourself. Again, the startups are not trying to replicate everything. You say, why am I going to do everything? No, I'm not going to build a better hotel. The reservation system is bad. I'm going to create an online booking system that you fill out your information once when you sign up, and then you never need to fill out any information again. The way to steal that, to break that link, is you want to increase the specialization forces. You're trying to say, hey, do all these other things with this company, but do this with me because I'm much better. So I'm going to make it easy for you to do this activity. These are forces that act on the consumer to try to get a consumer to do everything with one company. If you go to the supermarket, you buy everything in the supermarket. The supermarket is trying to get you to do everything in integration. And then lastly, every time there's a big disruption attempt in an industry, if you break something that belongs to somebody, they're going to be unhappy, they're going to respond. If you can predict what they're likely to do, you need to preempt it. You need to have a strategy in place.
You advise the entrepreneurs to be close to customers and talk to customers. What is a good way to talk to customers?
One thing to remember talking to customers is what they think is generally not what they say. You can't just say, tell me what are your problems. To understand customers, it's not just about creating a survey. You need to find better tools to first observe them in what they're doing. From the data, get signals of what they're unhappy with. It is not easy. And that's probably why many companies don't do it or don't do it well.